All right, it's 9 a.m. Pacific time. We're going to go ahead and begin. Welcome to those of you who've shown up on time, which is not very many of you. This is the Over QUIC virtual interim. As always, this meeting is being recorded. This is the IETF note well. For those of you who might not be familiar with it, it indicates the intellectual property and code of conduct implications of you participating here. If you're not familiar with these tenets of IETF participation, please search for any of the terms that you see there at the bottom of the slide, and you can read about it to your heart's content. As we have for the past month or so, we're using Meet Echo for this meeting. Please use the client here to join the MOQ, participate in shows of hands. If you're not speaking, please mute your microphone and turn off your video. If you are going to speak, be aware that there is some latency before the audio actually kicks in. So you probably want to mute yourself at least a full second before you are planning to begin talking. If you're back and forth, just leave your mic on. Also, I strongly recommend that you use headphones because of some of the noise cancellation limitations of this platform. We need a scribe. I believe we only have 2 participants right now. So maybe we're just going to wait a minute for some people to join rather than punish the 3 people who are here on time by making one of them the scribe. Anyone willing to be a scribe that's joined us yet?
Maybe the chairs can pick somebody who is neither a chair, an editor, and didn't take minutes in Madrid, which should probably leave about 1 person.
I believe there are 2 choices. Victor, can you take notes today?
Sure.
Thank you. All right, lovely. Moving along. This is the agenda. We're going to devote it entirely to parameters today. Ian has slides presented. Would anyone like to bash this agenda? Alan?
I don't want to necessarily bash it, but maybe just can you save a few minutes at the end just to like give a general update on what's been going on non-parameter related issues in the repo.
And do we want to do that first in the interest of?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So
go ahead, Alan.
There's excluding a bunch of the parameters example PRs, of which there are 6 or 7. There's something like 28 total PRs open. We appreciate reviews from anyone. Some of them are like a small number of them are design. Many are editorial and minor design. Please keep the conversation going asynchronously, as synchronous time is limited. And I'll also make a plea for folks to write editorial PRs, as like the number of editorial issues is exploding, and it's like the editors are just we can't keep up by ourselves. Also, if you find a small issue, and you're pretty sure you know what the right fix is, feel free to skip the issue and go straight to a PR. It will likely be approved and merged and save, you know, an identifier. Victor's looking for where to put the minutes. Anyway, I think that's mostly all I had to say.
Okay. How does this work? Do I request slides, or you just want me to present? Maybe it's just present.
I'll do it. I was just answering a scribe
Okay.
question.
Yeah. Yay, subscribe parameter. These are like the most boring slides I've ever made. I love it. Next slide.
I've just given you slide control.
Oh, okay. No AI was harmed in the process of making these slides, to my knowledge. It's probably not even true. So, I mean, we can tweak this, but on a high level, my proposed principle was if the field is required to make the verb make sense and there's no sensible default, then it should not be a param. This is not so different from HTTP, where, I mean, for the most part, like if you have a get, you have things like a path, and you kind of have to have that, otherwise it doesn't make sense. So subscribe doesn't make sense without a track name and namespace. So my proposal is that they remain fields. Params are easier to change in future versions or extensions. So even if it's required now, it might not be in the future. Or if you want to make some fancy extensions, that's like the Uber filter extension, then it's easier to make your new Uber filter extension compatible with the old one if you don't have to continue specifying some like weird value for the old one just to like also put your new thing in a param. All right. And we've already kind of seen that as things have evolved over time. So it's obvious that there are a number of ways of doing this. Okay. There are some omission issues related to this. I'm not sure if this is an exhaustive list. Some are only somewhat related, but one is you can't immediately update a subscription because I'm trying to think, you might specify a value that's basically invalid, I think is my recollection. There's a suggestion to make group order and filters into optional params, and a request for an explicit way to do an unfiltered subscription. All right, so here's my first page of open PRs. Expires is, most of these PRs are actually pretty straightforward in terms of what they do. Out of the expires conversation, there was another issue that came up, which is like, what exactly does that mean? But the mechanical change of making it a param is about as simple as you would think. Subscriber priority is similar. In that case, we had to assign a default of 128. That's straightforward. Group order, similarly, the default is ascending. Given how we've seen people use the system, that seems like a sensible default. And for forward, the default is true. I mean, forward is a relatively new feature that we just added. It's probably a great candidate for something that probably could have been a param from the start when it was added. I have another 2 PRs. Largest location. This is already optional and kind of has like a quirky way we encode it anyway, because you don't always have a largest location. So it makes sense to have the default be none and make a param. So, I mean, it's really, again, this is just a different spelling of what we have in the wire today. The last one is probably the most odd, controversial, potentially interesting one, which is publisher priority. This was partially motivated because I thought it seemed kind of wasteful to put a priority value on objects, particularly like, datagrams and other things where like, that byte or two like might actually matter. And so there was a suggestion, I think that's already been made before, of like, maybe you should just be able to specify a publisher priority in the publish or subscribe okay or fetch okay. That's like, unless I tell you otherwise, the publisher priority for this track and all the objects in it is X. The PR makes the unfortunate choice of conflating that with trying to also add it as an object extension property. as an alternative to the current wire encoding, it's less clear if that's a good idea. So why don't I pause there, because I've gone over a number of things. As I said, most of these are pretty mechanical. You can feel free to look at the PRs, but like, again, some of these things are like largest location is optional. This is a different way of making it optional. It's kind of the same. So yeah, Alan.
I just want to point out that last PR is sort of not like the others are just moving something.
Yes.
Like they're currently fixed fields. We're making them parameters and assigning them a default. If they're not in the parameters, then you know what they are. This one is like a compression feature. So I think we should probably just set it aside for the purpose of this discussion. And like, you know, and I think the most important part, I think, is like, I would maybe roll back to the principle, because that is like, if for have people to look at, because I think it's the most important thing is like, we already have a mix of things that are parameters and things that are fixed fields. And I don't think it evolved in an intentional way. I could be wrong. So we should decide, like, we'll probably come up with some more thing we need before we ship. Does it go in fixed fields or parameters? And having a principle will make it clear, like, oh, does it meet whatever we agree is the principle? If so, it's fixed field. Otherwise, it's param.
Yeah, like we have like max
concentrate on that as opposed to any particular spelling.
Yeah, max cache duration is already a param, and I don't know, we decided to make it a param for some reason and not. But I mean, it's reasonable, but like, it's an example of where a case we went the other way.
Delivery timeout as well.
Yep.
And auth. So
yep.
Yeah. All right.
Colin.
I'm trying problems unmuting. It didn't work the first time. Can you guys hear me now? Yeah, okay. So this is really more of a chair question. Like, I realize this agenda went out on Monday, but like I've been on vacation this week and I didn't actually realize we were discussing this. Given I objected to this whole parameter change and after implementation experience, can I have some agenda time to talk about why I think it's a bad idea?
I mean, you could have it now. I mean, I think we're talking about whether or not this is a bad idea.
I'm not prepared to talk about it right now. I don't have any slides. I didn't realize this was happening. You know, this seems to be our thing. When we have different people with different opinions on it, who we have present is the editors, right?
Okay. If you would like to structure have like an actual prepared talk for our next meeting, whenever that is, you can have time on that for sure.
Okay. So perfect. Then I'd like to sort of, defer the parameters, what our principle for the parameters question off until we can have some time to talk about that and what the implementation experience on this has been.
Do you want to add anything about the implementation experience specifically, even if like not principles, just like commentary that's could be helpful?
Yeah, sure. So look, I think, I'd like to get this in a much more organized way, but I think the thing that we've been seeing is, so at the beginning of a meeting where there's a startup, there's a fair amount of signaling traffic that you're processing. And so the performance of doing, of having 100,000 people join at the same time is not completely trivial, like startup time of meetings and whatever. So we do end up with CPU bound things on join messages, on messages that happen at the beginning of setting up all the subscriptions of some large thing. So I think that's sort of substantial. And I think that the things that would really, that help us on this is, when we started going to this sort of parameters thing, internally, we have to parse all of these to fixed structures anyway. We're like effectively, if you're writing in C or whatever the language is, like we're going to end up with something. We're not going to end up with a map of header values that you look up each time in the map. What's the value of this? That's way too slow. So all the things that might be in there, we end up parsing them into that anyway. And so things like the default values or something seem really irrelevant. I mean, sure, we can have default values on anything. It doesn't really matter. That's not a win per se. And that having them be in order so you knew exactly what was coming next was really speeded up parsing. And then also in understanding what the messages are. Like in the spec, we just see people, when it's unclear what headers can go in what messages, or when you're updating the text around one of the verbs and you forget all of the headers that can go in it, like we've just seen this over and over again where it got updated for one thing, but not another thing. Like I think it makes it harder to understand the spec, to not understand, here's the things that can be here. And sure, they can be optional. I don't care about that, but having sort of a struct that indicates which ones are there and which ones are optional, and how we can get better performance on the parsing. Now, I understand that maybe people would say, like, look, if we mandate these have to be in numerical order or something like that, you might be able to parse faster. But like for the required ones in particular, even if they have a sensible default value, just being able to know exactly what's coming next on the parsing was significantly faster. So maybe there's other implementations. Maybe we didn't really optimize things now. I mean, this is sort of sketchy early information, but it seemed like it made both the spec less understandable and it made it harder to sort of understand how to, get the high performance sort of version. And it leads to all kinds of problems like, well, what do you have multiple copies of things you're not allowed to have multiple copies of? Like there's a bunch of things that it doesn't seem to help here. So like, could I live with this? Like, yeah, obviously we could, but I'm not seeing this as a win. Like, I don't understand why we're making this change. Right? It's actually seems very much a lose. And I've using HTTP headers as the model for how to do this, like that's definitely not a win, right? If we could redo HTTP, it wouldn't be ASCII headers, right? So I'm just like, that's sort of, I'm trying to coalesce all my thoughts into something coherent there. And maybe when I write it down and go it all out, I'll be like, hey, this is just like spelling on a wire and it doesn't matter. But the feeling it's probably not going to be is what we're getting to. Does that make, I mean, do you see where I'm coming from on those ones?
Yeah, no, that was helpful. I think the argument probably I'm most sympathetic to is the CPU argument, because I think that's like, I do agree that the control traffic can actually be like somewhat substantial. I mean, I haven't done any benchmarks to tell really if it's a problem, but like I do think. I will note that in terms of adding and removing fields and forgetting to like say, oh, this header can go in this one, we've also kind of putzed that up about 5 times with track status with actual fields. Okay. But so I mean, we are not immune to like making editorial errors in either case.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think so I guess putting it so the things that are params today, would you propose that they not be params because we need them like delivery timeout?
I mean, I think, I agree with the concept of coming up with a principle for what is and what's not, and then going and fixing our current set of mistakes to align with that. And I'm not sure exactly. So I want to get to the principle and then we'll sort it out. Obviously, we need the extensions for extensions are going to be parameters like this. That's clear. No, I think everyone takes that for granted. But for things, particularly things that are mandatory to have but might have a reasonable default, I think that those are the ones that I'm particularly not seeing a win on. And again, I'd like to have better numbers. I'd like to have something more coherent than what I just said right now.
Okay. That's all. Thanks. Q, so I guess Martin.
Yeah, I'm next. As an individual, like Colin, it'd be really helpful when you do your presentation, or even better, like earlier on the list, you just articulate an alternative principle. Take a second to think of. I mean, you don't have to do it live. Like, think about it.
100% agree, Mark. I mean, okay. I intended to do that before we got to discussing this. I just didn't realize this was up for discussion.
Fair enough. Okay, yeah, like I'm not going to put you on the spot, but maybe like I said, sending out to the list would be awesome. Thanks.
Mo, good work.
Yeah, I think it would be maybe useful to kind of update the proposed principle a little bit more narrower, because it can be, I'm not sure it's a reason it should be. Like, for example, if we think that, yeah, there may be a default, but it's used 1% of the time, then I think that's a good argument to say, no, it should not be a parameter, because it's almost always in every single subscribe. So I think the bar should not be that there is a possible default. That should be, there's a highly likely default. Because otherwise it doesn't make sense to burn the bits to always encode this as a parameter when it's in every single message. The other thing is that it's a little weird if we have all of these in one big namespace. Right now, we don't have many. We don't have many verbs and we don't have many parameters. Maybe the spec is close to done. Maybe we'll only have a handful, but I'm worried if we get a lot more verbs and a lot more parameters that, having them all have this, share this unified namespace and they don't make sense in most messages. So I think it's maybe another principle that it should be widely applicable to most verbs, not just subscribe or something.
Thanks, Mo. I think those are both good thoughts, and particularly I think your point about like if you expect it to be in the vast majority of messages anyway, then kind of making it a param is sort of to Cullen's point, like a waste of CPU or bytes or whatever, because a param is a slightly less efficient encoding than a required field. So that's a fair point. So is delivery order an example of one that you expect to rarely be specified? We think that's true, right?
I think so.
Okay. Thanks. Alan.
Yeah, I mean, I would be shocked if the difference, like even if if one node has to process 100,000 subscribe messages, that like if you really spent time, I mean, I don't think it's going to make a difference in like the performance of the system if things are encoded one way or another. You might have to be a little bit more clever in like how you do it, and like it might be. I will yield that it'll probably be slightly slower, but I don't think in a meaningful way. So it would be great if we're going to have a discussion about performance, that somebody at least brings some numbers that we can talk about, because I think different people have different intuitions here. So that's one. And I think for the reference about HTTP, I think is interesting, because if you look at more recent specification that HTTP came out with, which is how you specify binary messages, which is used for OHI, things that were in like H2 or H3 specify everything is a name value pair. They took parts of the structured parts of the message, like the path and the authority, and they're like, these are just name value pairs. We will give them special names and we will put them in the name value pair section. That was undone when we went to binary encoding, because exactly something similar to this principle. You can't have a get without a path. So like it's a fixed field. It's got to be there. But you can have a get without, I don't know, except encoding. Like, and so that's not there. And, I think something along these lines is reasonable. I'm not sure using the idea of like what is common and not common, because I think we're going to see different things across different applications, right? Some applications will be heavily driven by subscriber priority. Others, I think, are likely to always set it to 128 and let the publisher pick. So I don't know how far we'll get down there, but interested to see whatever the alternative principle is.
I mean, I think the principle that if you expect it to always be specified is an interesting one at the very least. The one thing I will note that is it could always be specified until like someone again comes up with like a version of the same functionality that's like, very slightly better in some way, shape, or form. Then suddenly like no one will specify it ever again.
Yeah, I mean, I think like priority is another good example. Like we spent a lot of time thinking about priority and we think we've got it right, but if like history teaches anything, it's that like maybe we didn't, and so it's quite possible that what we've said for priority is currently 1 byte, but then maybe in MOQ v2 we're like, oh, priority is now 3 bytes or whatever. It's some different encoding, and then as you say, like this message is sort of always there with that field in it.
I need to do a chair interrupt. Victor, are you actually taking notes?
I am in whatever the hedge doc that was created by me pressing the buttons that you told me to press.
Okay, weird. For some reason, mine is not showing that. But okay, thanks.
It is entirely possible that this is the wrong hedge doc, in which case I will have to.
Okay. Before you exit that, can you just like copy it into a text file, just in case we have some sort of snafu, and I can make sure that the minutes end up where they need to go.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Victor, you're on the queue.
Sure. Yeah, regarding the CPU and key value pairs, what Colin says it's true, but this is also kind of like how things like
HTTP settings and quick transport parameters work. At least in our implementation, we have basically fixed fields for anything that we would care. And whenever we parse them, we just see the key, see the value, and replace the default value with not default value if we encounter those. So I would be really surprised if this is a CPU bottleneck. It is definitely very slow if you insist into serializing everything into a hash map and then undoing that, but you don't have to do that. And in fact, for protocols that are underlying MOQ, we already don't do that. The other point is I generally agree with the idea that we should. The other with performance is that if on handling 100K joins is complicated, then you're presumably not just bandwidth constrained, but also, not only CPU constrained, but you're also bandwidth constrained. And presumably that means that you do care to reduce the number of bytes in your control messages to some extent. The second point...
Are you saying there, just to clarify, that compactness as well as computation are worth considering?
Yeah, because like whenever you have any scenario, like I have millions of people sending me this message, it both matters how much you do in terms of CPU versus how much in terms of network, and there are like overheads for both. And there is some sort of trade-off, but in general, it tends to be really hard to come up with a scheme that where compressing is not beneficial just because of the way modern computers are, like network turns out to be often more expensive, and even not network, but like other source of bandwidth. The second point is I do agree with Mo that if someone will change something 99% of the time, we probably should just leave that as a field. With priorities, I particularly have a bit of mixed feelings, because ideally what you would want to do is you would want to be we want to encourage people to think about priorities. So to some extent, leaving that field optional might be counterproductive. But then again, this definitely applies for publisher priorities, but not necessarily for subscriber priorities.
I will remind everyone that I believe HB2 still has a priority portion of the frame, right? In like that framing is still vestigially left around from the original priority scheme, because like we couldn't get rid of it.
Sure.
I can't remember which parts, but anyway. So.
Just as soon as okay, Ian, I find that argument compelling. I'll be thinking about that.
Yeah. It was like, well, no one wanted to rev the ALPN of HB2, so like there's still stuff to parse this stuff. That's like you just like toss it. Anyway, all right. Okay, I have more time, so I'm going to do. Martin. Would you like to
you just had a couple of you didn't get through all your slides. I thought maybe.
I know, that's why I was going. Yeah. Okay.
About the point that you made about H2, TLS is even more like that. It has like almost all fields in TLS handshake are like vestigial deprecated fields that you left blank.
Yeah.
Including the version field.
Yes. Don't make me cry. That's a particularly sad example. All right. All right. I don't know if I want to. I'm going to do this last because it's the most. I want to bring this one up because I think it's a good topic of discussion. But so based on our conversation in Stockholm, there's this idea of when you do subscribe namespace to get a bunch of publishes, how do you get those publishes to have like reasonable defaults? So I before this idea that you can copy the params from subscribe namespace. I think Cullen commented that this was, likely to cause unintended consequences. I'm sympathetic to that fact for sure. But I think there is like a need for some mechanism of this shape. I don't know if something of this shape. I know that was it Mo, and I know folks were like looking into, when you have a lot of subscriptions, you might want picking which ones to send for like active speaker and other use cases like that, as well as server-side APR, like all those things. I don't know if whatever mechanism folks are working on for that would solve this use case. Basically, like I would like to know, I think we need something to allow you to, at the very least, say, when I subscribe namespace, I don't actually want the objects like immediately. I want you to wait and not send them to me until like after I know what the heck the track is. I think we probably want something like that at the very least, and maybe we want some other things. So, Colin, thoughts?
Hey, I just missed that use case as the way to do that. I agree we want something like that, and so that this may make sense. I think I sort of like retract my previous comments, or my question was answered of why do we need this? So I get it.
Yeah. So there's a question of how general does it need to be? Do we kind of want to allow a list and say like only these params get copied over because we don't know what the other ones do, or do we want to, stuff like that? Mo, yes.
So we did have there were several discussions during the last IETF about richer filters, if that's what you're asking. Selecting n of larger set of tracks. Selecting specific qualities or specific bandwidths. There were a lot of discussions about things like that. I'm not sure if it has any intersection with parameters. We didn't talk as much about the encoding of it, but the encoding of it will definitely introduce new fields. Whether they're parameters or fields, I don't think is a huge impact to the logic of what we're going to propose.
Sure.
I don't think it'll matter much for this.
Is what you're going to propose, do you think it will sufficiently solve the use cases, at least I currently have in mind, for why you might want to have params in subscribe namespace be defaults for the resulting publishes? Or like, is there enough overlap that
yes,
I can stop thinking about this and assume that you will solve this problem for me? That's what I'm asking. I'm hoping the answer is yes.
We can solve the problem, jointly.
Okay, yeah, sure.
We do have there will be fields in this, group subscribe, or I don't think it's subscribe namespace is kind of overloaded right now because I think the original intent for subscribe namespace was just to find out about the names. It's like name discovery, and I think that's one of the problems that we're having is there are two different use cases. One is I just want to discover names. The other use case is I don't care about the names. I just want the actual tracks. I want them to come in. I don't want you to announce them to me. I just want you to start giving me those objects of those tracks. And of course, you have to have a way to associate the track alias with the name of the track. So that's the one little wrinkle that we need to iron out. But I don't think we should overload the discovery of track names with the subscription to multiple tracks or a filter on a large set of tracks. Calling them the same thing, subscribe namespace, to me is pretty confusing for a lot of the applications that want to do one or the other.
Okay, that's good feedback. Okay, I will park this concept for now as at least a proof of concept of a thing that one could do to allow subscribe namespace to have defaults, but and not actively pursue it. And then whenever we get a more fleshed out proposal from folks, then we can decide if we can can this entirely and that there's some other mechanism that's better, or we should think about this more deeply and come back to it. I've said
Oh, Ian, just wanted to roll back and go back to one slide. I just wanted to. So I mean, what Mo said scares me a little because, like, I think we came up with like we parked on wildcard subscribe for 2 years, and then we just came up with a way to do it. Now I'm perfectly willing to see that we maybe didn't do it right, but it does seem like you've got like a very big idea brewing there, and so I would just like to see it like on the list ASAP so we can understand what you're talking about. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah. So just real quickly, we'll try to get slides up or some text at least together pretty soon. I haven't talked to Will since the IETF, so we'll coordinate a way to get some Google Slides up or Google Docs at least with some bare text. But the short of it is, we fundamentally don't want the subscribe machinery in the way. We don't want a case where I subscribe namespace and then I get a bunch of publishers coming in and I choose which one to subscribe to, and I have to subscribe to that one. And then I get other ones and I say, oh, this is more interesting. Now I have to subscribe to that one and unsubscribe to the other one. That's the fundamental machinery that doesn't work for these high scale use cases. So what you're calling, wildcard subscribe, or some people have called it auto subscribe, or or multi subscribe. But anyway, it's a way to say I'm going to subscribe to this set, and possibly with some filters. And that's really the key part, is you don't want to subscribe to everything there. There may be some filters that you want the relays to to prune down the whole population to you. But the key is that you're going to get the actual objects coming in. You're not going to have to do all the subscribe machinery to say, oh, here's the name and publish. Let me subscribe to it. Oh, let me unsubscribe to the one that I had before. Eliminating that machinery is kind of key to this multi-subscribe or auto-subscribe or wildcard subscribe use case.
Okay, look forward to seeing it. I will say that, like, at least what you're proposing is probably better in some ways than what's there, but what you're talking about does exist, at least in some rudimentary form now, because subscribe namespace is already filtered by the namespace you select. So you'll only get the things that are in that namespace, and the publisher is allowed to publish objects immediately on tracks that match in that namespace, because it can send publish with forward one and then start sending objects immediately. So it's just that the subscriber has the opportunity to confirm or reject it by sending publish error or publish okay. But I imagine your proposal will optimize a number of steps in this flow. So I look forward to seeing it. Okay. I think the other thing I was going to say just about subscribe names, like the slide that's up, is that I think we could probably, I'm not sure if the PR, like, I don't know if it's every param, but like forward seems to be one that like might clearly make sense. And there may be others, like it's possible that I want to put a filter or something on any publishers that come, like, I want to subscribe in this namespace, but if any track shows up, I only want to objects starting from group 1000 or later, or something like that. Like, so I don't know, maybe we can just write down the ones that we think, the params we think that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's sensible. I think, yeah, forward seems to be, it'd be great if that was the same as some other set of params but I don't know. Anyway, like it'd be great if we decide we're not going to move some params to some things to params, and the set of things that we don't move, it'd be great if like those were the same set of the things that we shove into subscribe namespace or something, just from like my brain perspective. But that's purely convenience. So anyway, Suez.
Hey, thanks. Like I had a long discussion with Will and Mo on some of the active speaker flow and filtering, and also the application feedback in the context of this one. And I have to say, I have to agree with Alan in the sense that what is defined today will provide an equivalent of wildcard subscribe. The only thing that's missing probably is like how do we if the forward is, if when I do subscribe namespace, can I say apply forward one for all the tracks that comes in? That way, I don't want to wait for another round trip to start getting the objects to me. That way, a new publishers come, it comes with forward equal to 1, and I can have a track alias and the objects that follow map directly. So that I think we are pretty close to have some of those things, and if you can apply some kind of filter logic on top of that and some way to specify these kind of parameters or fields that apply to globally to all the tracks, I think we're pretty close to something like that.
Thank you. While I'm unparking things, the publisher priority thing that's not ready to merge is, I don't think there's actually another open issue for this, but is there interest in adding a param to publish or whatever that is the default publisher priority, so we don't have to encode it on the wire in a bunch of other different spots? Or is that, like, I've heard that mentioned before, but I don't think, like, I'm not currently actively planning on doing that, but it seems to like it's been mentioned a lot. Sorry, Alan.
Yeah, I'm working with a team that has a use case for sending datagrams, and they're like, so like, why do I want to use MOQ? How much overhead does it add per datagram? And right now, I think the min is 4 bytes. Even if you have track alias, group, object, and priority. So if we can kill priority out of there by like sending it in publish and just saying like, there's a if you don't hear, if there's not an explicit encoding that there's a priority in this datagram, it inherits a default that I said when I initialized the track. I mean, I recognize, anyway, I think there's an opportunity to compress there. And I think there's a use case, or people are telling me that there's a use case.
Okay. So it's something we should probably try to fix at some point in the near future. Colin.
Same as Alan, I'm going to be on it. Like, anytime we can figure out a way to make UDP data smaller for some use cases, nothing to do with the control plane, I'm going to be 100% behind that. Like, I think it's really relevant to small audio, as I mentioned before. So very much support that there, whatever we can do to make it smaller. And of course, I think we should systematically look at compression, but this seems like it would help.
Yeah, well, that one seemed like it was really sticking out to me, and especially on datagrams, as being like, okay, why do we decide this one field that, like, I kind of expect for like an audio call, like, it's probably the same number the whole time. Like, do you really think it's going to change during? I mean, I don't know, it might, but like,
no, I don't. I think most of the use cases, it doesn't change for many of the tracks.
Right.
And so, yeah, that seems really interesting. And like, look, I know how we got it there. We just copied whatever we had in the stream packet, and like, we just didn't think about it, right? I mean, it's, like, this is a good thing to go back and look at how can we make our messages that matter smaller. So yeah, go for it.
Thanks. Victor, do you want
to? I think my observation is, in datagrams is not sure, because the main cases where it really matters are like subgroups and when you're doing SVC layering and stuff like that.
It doesn't even really matter there, because you can always just use the subgroup ID.
It matters because of the way they work across groups.
Oh, okay, maybe.
There is like a matter of how to scale, but for datagrams, you almost never want that, except for like active speaker. Maybe, I'm not sure.
Okay, then I will take this PR and try to clean it up and actually do the thing that I think probably people want, which is make datagrams smaller. Thank you.
Just in terms of making it systematic, I think if we make priority come out, then you're left with track alias, group ID, and object ID.
You kind of need those.
And I think actually we already merge one that lets you omit object ID if you're using a group per datagram. So like, it just comes down to two, like a track ID and one object identifier, I think is like the min encoding for a datagram. I don't think we can get any smaller unless, I don't know, Colin or Victor has a clever idea there. I don't want to like trigger Martin, because who's been wrestling with the status objects and end of group, because we tried to compress things there, and then it revealed a bunch of like interesting things about status objects that we're not sure what to do with. But anyway, I think we're getting close on the sort of compressing things. If anybody has any more ideas how to compress the data plane, can we just dump them in an issue so we would like to see all the brainstorm things people want to see someday, so that we can make a more systematic approach to it.
Yep. Thanks. All right. So this is the big PR that is probably the least straightforward, and there are choices I kind of made when I was writing the PR to try to just make it simple that maybe aren't perfect, but the concept is that there's 6 different types of start or end filter: none, largest object, next group, prior group, absolute group, and absolute location, which is absolute group plus object. And in this particular PR, I kind of tried to update all the verbs just to see how it would look. Actually, in my opinion, from a readability perspective, it actually reads better in a lot of spots, but it's possible I removed too much text in that process. I don't know. But the concept is pretty straightforward. If we did want to do something like this, would we want to include fetch? I will add that we've changed filters a number of times, and so of all things that they feel like something we might want to leave some extensibility to and not require being in the main portion of the message. But that's my current thought. So Victor, you're first.
Yeah, I don't think we should touch fetch, because it sounds like with fetch, unless you're doing joining fetch, which I'm not even sure how this would work with joining fetch. With regular fetch, you almost always are going to just specify the actual ranges. For subscribe, I think this is useful, since most of the time you just want to issue a plain unfiltered subscribe with a joining fetch, or maybe subscribe with the next group, but plain unfiltered subscribe with joining fetch makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm gonna +1 not messing with fetch if we do anything here. I'll also note that you're adding, so at some point we removed end object from the subscribe filter, with the idea being you can pick a group that you want to end at.
Yes.
But you can't pick an individual object. And if you as a subscriber get an individual, have gotten everything you want out of the last group that you want, but not the end, you just unsubscribe, and then that will stop it. But so I think it looks like you're adding specific end location object back. So I'm not sure if we need it or not, but I would like to encourage people who have use cases to come forward, because I prefer simplicity, but
that was mostly for editorial simplicity, and so we could have the discussion, because I cannot actually remember why we removed end object anyway, except it seemed kind of useless. But it's also easy, so I have no idea.
Yeah, I see Martin in the queue, and I think I know what he's gonna say, because there's also an issue about which Martin has filed, about getting rid of start location, which is start object. It's you can only filter based on groups, because groups are join points. So you can't create a filter that starts from a particular place. Although I think with joining fetch, you really do want the logic of I don't want anything lower than the current object, because I'm going to get everything before that with fetch, even if it shows up later. But anyway, I'll let
Victor, you still in the queue?
More about it. But in general, I like the idea of defining our filters by there's an optional start and there's an optional end, is kind of better than the current construction. I like it better than the current construction.
Okay, thanks. The nice part is it has a very sensible meaning, which is if you specify nothing, you get everything, which is kind of what I would hope would happen. So at least the principle of the least surprise is embodied. But yeah, Mo, go for it.
I think this is the best example of a motivation to move to parameters, because the filters, I think we know we're going to change the spelling. We know in future versions there may be different ways to do filtering. So I think this is a perfect example of what should be a parameter, because we know that we're going to want to, change these things without disruptively changing the structure of every message. And I agree that we should avoid messing with fetch until the dust settles on subscribe, and then we can revisit it and see, okay, is there enough symmetry to move things over, or is it's too different and let's not. So let's just delay it don't necessarily not do it, but just delay it until the dust settles on subscribe.
Okay. Thanks, Bo. Martin.
I just entered the queue to say that the reason that we have end object was because it simplified the logic for when you can send a fin, that when you had like subscribes ending in the middle of a group, there was a whole lot of ambiguity there. So we just made it a little analytically easier by doing that. I don't remember exactly what my motivation was for getting rid of start object. I thought there was a case for it, but I would have to go back and look at the issue I wrote to see what the reasoning was.
Okay. All right. Colin.
I'm in favor of this thing, though. I noted that the text seemed a little bit confusing when I started reading the actual what you're trying to do made sense, but it seemed like confusing when basically the definitions of these were written thinking about the start, using them in the start, not the end. And when you read them in the context of the end, the text was a little more confusing. So I think we just need to, that's just wordsmithing. One thing that came a suggestion to me that I think might be worth thinking about is, instead of having none, I think what you have is two different values. You have one that's 0, 0, and you want to have one that's infinity, infinity, effectively. I think that might make it much easier to reason about and write the text than having none, even though you'd use it in roughly the same situations. All of those are like throwaway trivial comments, but I just think that it's right path. We just need a little more work on the details.
Okay, so I think the easy way to spell that would be 0, 0 is a trivial thing to spell, and so maybe you just have a type that's like end of track or some, right? Yeah, I mean, maybe like replace none with start of track and with two values, start of track and end of track, right? But I guess I was saying start of track is trivial because it's 0, 0.
Sure, yeah. And end of track, I mean, is
technically we can
write the text, but we both know what you mean by it, right? Like, yeah.
I don't really want to make everyone spell out like, max, UN 64. I mean,
yeah. Of course.
It just seems silly, but
yeah. And like, look, obviously you could use absolute group to do this, but I'm not proposing that. I'm proposing that we have two values that are shortcuts for that, and we just figure out how to, write the text such that it makes sense. And obviously, the end of track one would only ever be used in the end, not the start. And so it's pretty easy to write the text on it. It basically means you don't filter based on this end value, right? That's
So maybe So maybe that's another case where like I can rewrite the text to be more clear about the end location bit
and look, that doesn't change anything that we're actually doing it for real here. It's just like how to write it. So I'm happy no matter what you do. But yeah.
No, you're that makes sense. Okay, cool.
Just to follow up on what Colin just said, does that mean if you want to remove a start filter, for example, or remove the end filter, you're okay with subscribe, update, and end of track? Or would you rather have a mechanism to explicitly remove that, which means there's nothing, or set it back to none, set it to none instead, which means nothing? Or again, it's kind of a spelling question.
We're going to have three different sort of things here. You can remove the subscription, you can change the filter, or you can change the stop forwarding flag. I mean, we've got basically three ways that you could cause the data to stop coming to you and then later restart it again. And that doesn't deeply bother me that we have three different ways that are sort of optimized for different use cases. Like, I don't know, it's sort of weird, but like I can live with that.
Okay. I guess we're getting on. I wanted, somewhat related to filters, I want to just mention there's an open PR, and I'm sorry I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it is about whether a relay is ever allowed to terminate a subscription because it knows that nothing else can match the filter. And I wrote the PR thinking that we wanted to leave that door open. I definitely don't want to mandate it because it's basically computationally infeasible to know if everything is, in some cases, like weird sparse tracks and wide filters, like no one's going to do that. But I guess I thought maybe we want to leave that door ajar, but then I also came up with reasons why you might not want to, like let the subscriber say like, yeah, no, I know there's no filter here. I'm going to change the filter later and then have something else happen. So I just didn't know if anybody had a quick thought on whether we want to normatively prohibit that, like relays don't ever use a filter to end a subscription downstream, or we allow that to happen if relays want to do the work.
I mean, Relay is going to do what Relay is going to do, but I don't know.
That is of course true, but I think if relays do something that a subscriber is counting on oh yeah, I saw my subscription, I got everything that matched my subscription, and I will use that as a trigger to update my subscription filter. And which won't be possible if immediately coming behind that is a subscribe done. So I think there's an interop issue if we think that's important. I think the flip side of it is I worry about some of the like absolute joining fetch and track switching things we've come up with, whether we are expecting relays to know this filter has been completely satisfied and I'm going to terminate the track rather than making the subscriber unsubscribe from it. And sorry, I sort of took a right turn from whatever you're presenting, so feel free to shut that
down. Okay, Victor, did you? Okay.
Yeah, I forgot what I was going. What were we talking before, Alan?
I think.
How you want to do subscribe update, like whether you want to.
Yeah, I wanted to point out that you already can. That we don't have restrictions that you cannot.
You can't
widen the start. Yeah.
Yes.
And there are good reasons to do that.
I thought we agreed in Stockholm we were going to remove that restriction.
No, we agreed that one we're not going to remove. We're removing the end, but not the start.
Yeah, you can widen the end, but not the start.
Yeah, there are some really weird things with subgroups that can happen if you widen the start.
Yes.
I just want to. I'm going to close the queue soon. We've got about 4 minutes left. So, Ian, do you want to get to your last slide?
Yeah. To answer Alan's question, if you think of forward as a filter, this means as soon as you send forward to 0, reset the relay can close your thing. So this does not sound like exactly like prudent. This does not sound like it makes sense if you look at it that way.
This is my last.
I was not thinking about forward, only filters.
Mo.
Just to Alan's last point, I think, like Ian said, relay's going to do what relay's going to do, but not because they're trying to antagonize or go against the subscriber. Relay's in a view of all subscribers, so their actions may dictate some other behavior than that one subscriber wants. There may be some limits on the relay that it needs to honor all these other subscriptions, and it has to alter your subscription in order to do that. So I think it's inevitable that we can't mandate relays to always forward everything 100% the same way.
All right. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I got a lot of good feedback. I can now go update PRs and think about some other things as well. But Martin, I guess, would you like your 2 minutes back? Maybe not. Okay. Victor, you're still in the queue. Did you want to say anything else? Okay. All right.
All right. Thanks, Ian. I'm glad you got something out of that. Our next interim will be in 3 weeks on August 27th. And Magnus should be back from his vacation then. So we'll see you then. And Colin, I look forward to your alternative proposal for a principal. Again, I really like to see it on the list rather than just waiting for the 27th, but you will have the agenda time on the 27th regardless.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And like, look, I understand it's totally disruptive to like have me say like in the meeting, oh, I don't want to move forward with what we're talking about today. But like, I hope I can bring something that made this worthwhile, even if it is like, yeah, having rethought about this carefully and collected some data, like we should go do what Ian proposed, like whatever. I'll approach it with an open mind, see where I can get. So thank you guys.
Sure.
Sort of a process question, which is I don't know what the official IETF rule is for how many days in advance we should be publishing agendas for interims. For these sort of regular ones, we've normally been kind of targeting Monday, and I don't know exactly. They're usually not first thing, so it's probably not even 48 hours. And I'm perfectly willing to hear like, that's too late, you jokers, get it together and send it out earlier. Can someone just tell me when you need it by, and we will meet the deadline?
No, I mean, look, I'm not really arguing that. Okay, like I missed it this time, but I guess what I would say is, if you have people that have differing views on things, get both sides to present.
Okay, I mean, I think it's a little bit in this case, like this was something that was, we asked for agenda, or you asked for agenda time in Madrid, and then we agreed like we don't want to talk about this in the full IETF because
yeah, no, I know. Like we agreed that I'd get time to talk about it. And then
there was a lot of, there was list traffic before on the top. Anyway, I like this one. It's totally like, I think it's very reasonable to say that 40 hours is not enough advanced time to get people, but like, I guess I thought people were reading the list, and if they said, "Can I present or can I bring data?" that would have come forward. So, I don't know. Like,
I mean, I asked for agenda in Madrid, right? And we decided to slide it out to one of these meetings. I mean, like it's not like my request just came up today, right?
But I mean, I mean, my main goal here as an editor is just to like resolve the question of like, what are we doing with filters and params and stuff? Like, it's not that I have like a particularly, like, I'm fine with spelling it either way, but it's kind of like up in the air now. And it's pretty clear that the ones that are params today were sort of there by accident, and we didn't really think about it too hard about what went where. And so it'd be nice to, going forward, have at least a sketch of a principle, or like,
all right.
And look, I don't want to be the person that we shouldn't be able to change our agendas at the last moment, right? I mean, like, we should be able to agenda bash at the meeting and change our agenda if it's the right thing to do. So I'm not being like, we need our agendas out 2 weeks ahead of time or something like that. But 2 days ahead of time, like, given the track records of the response times of most other emails on the list, that doesn't, like.
Okay, we can. Is the Friday before okay? Like, would you like a full week? Like, I'm happy to do whatever. Just name a time.
If you put it a week ahead of time, it'll definitely be read beforehand. Okay. I think if you put it 2 days beforehand, it probably won't be read until the morning of the meeting or perhaps the meeting. But I don't really object to that if that's how we're running or we're getting stuff done, right? I don't like, we should do what helps us get work done quickly. I'm not arguing for one thing or another.
So Colin doesn't really seem to want a deadline. I mean, I think always earlier is better. And if you manage to get it the week before, at some point the week before, like the earlier you go out, the better. But if something comes out on Tuesday, you're like, oh no, we really need to talk about X tomorrow, or the morning of, oh, we really need to talk, then like, that's fine. So I think, as Colin is right, to push back against a hard deadline. But yeah, like if you know, then send an email, and like, as soon as you know, rather than just waiting. All right. So I think
I would just say in general, like a week for things on the email list, like a week is, you'll get some response time, and things like consensus calls, I feel strongly should be 2 weeks. I mean, obviously a week would be better on agenda time or whatever, but I don't want to be like overly whiny that we have like some process that people miss, so we can't talk about X. Like,
all right, we're running way over, but the last thing is the R2 adoption calls out, one for Cat 4, that's due on the 8th, and then the confirmation of the idea that we will not rename MOQ in any way, due the 13th, and then the draft consensus catch up on getting up to draft 13 is due August 26th. So if you haven't already, please comment on those on the list, and I will see you all in 3 weeks.